Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Home Recording Essentials with me, Matsukawa, here at the Blue Room again. Today we're going to be going over compression. So, without further ado, what is compression? From what I understand, compressors were put in walkie-talkies for soldiers in combat, so they could still understand each other while missiles and fucking bullets were going off in the background. Nowadays we use it for several reasons. We use it to make sure vocals are leveled out and can fit in a nice pocket over the instrumental. We use it on guitars to get like a more of aggressive, more in your face sound. We use it on drums for them to be more in your face. The most common use for a compressor is to put instrumentation and vocals more in the foreground rather than in the background. And how it does this is by taking some of the loudest parts in the signal and making them just as quiet as the quietest parts of the signal. And then you take that entire signal and you boost it up. Okay, so let me give you an example of this, right? So here I got an Ableton session open again. I have my handy dandy SM58 microphone. If you watched the last video, you already understand how to set your mic pre and your levels. Now that I have that all set up, I'm gonna label my tracks, of course. Here's Vox 1. And I dragged in a beat in here that I made with my friend Ashton. I'm gonna call this instrumental, inst for instrumental. So there's a very big difference between me going, hey, right? And me going, hey, right? Let's say I do those things over an instrumental and I don't want one of the hays to be too loud. I don't want one of the hays to be too quiet. So what I do, I slap a compressor on it. So let me go do that right now, right? Let's say let's just pretend I'm recording some fucking ad-libs. All right, let's have fun with this. Hey! Hey. Okay, so if you look at the screen, I mean, you'll notice that the first hey was very loud, and you'll notice that the second hey was very quiet, right? So what do we do about that? We can play this back. Hey! Hey. First hey hurts the fucking ears. Second hey, you can barely even hear. So I'm gonna turn the overall volume down to begin with, because I don't need it to be that loud. Hey! So now I can barely hear the second hey. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my favorite compressor, or one of my favorite compressors. It's just the transparent handy dandy R compressor. I'm gonna put that on this track. And I'm going to set it up. So, important thing to note about this compressor. So, what are we looking at here, right? So, most compressors have a ratio, threshold, and output gain. Those to me are like the three most important factors of a compressor that you should be looking at, right? So with this compressor, you can see it. There's a ratio, there's a threshold, and there's an output gain, right? So what do those three things do, right? So we're gonna dive into a little bit of math. I know this is a little bit boring, but it's very simple math. So decibels are our measurement for volume, right? So the threshold and the ratio work in conjunction with each other. So if, let's say I have my threshold at -10, right? And my signal, or -20, let's do -20, right? And my signal goes up to -16. So that means my signal was 4 decibels over the threshold, right? So if I set my ratio to 4:1, right? 4:1, right? So this is roughly 4, right? Those 4 decibels that went over the threshold in my compressor are going to be reduced back down to 1. So basically, what this does is any amount of signal that goes over this threshold gets divided by this ratio. Got it? Okay, so now what does this output gain do, right? The output gain is used to make up the lost volume when you compress the signal. You're basically swashing the signal with the threshold and the ratio, and then you're making it back up with the makeup gain, or the output gain. So, let me go to a full reset. Now, very important tip for any engineer or producer even, or artist, you know. You don't listen with your eyes, you listen with your ears, right? So, use your ears. Your decision shouldn't have to depend on a math equation, right? You can use math to give you a ballpark figure of what you're going for, but I wouldn't say depend on it entirely. So just use your ears when you're using compressors. We'll get to know them. If you need references, go reference some of your favorite songs and mixes. My personal favorite references are always to go to Kendrick mixed by Lee records since Good Kid, Mad City specifically. So I didn't even set my mic pre properly because clearly I clipped, right? If you look at my signal, if you look at my input, hey, I clipped, right? Well, what can I do? I can re-record that. Typically, it's a good idea to do that. But let's say the artist really liked the take, didn't really care about the clipping, or just didn't even notice it, right? You might not want to be like, hey, can you re-record this? You know, so if it's manageable, you know, work with what you got. The performance is more important than you getting under a certain amount of decibels, right? But if it's really bad, yeah, go ahead, re-record the shit. So the release doesn't work on this plugin unless you click this button. Like, it literally does nothing. Like, I can have it over here, I can have it over here. It's not going to make a difference if I don't engage manual. ARC, it stands for automatic release control. And basically, if you have that enabled, it's going to read your audio and kind of use an AI to figure out how to compress your signal as far as with the release. I don't really need that right now. I kind of want to have control over it, so I'm going to hit manual, right? So what the attack and release do is that it basically tells the compressor when to kick in after it goes past this threshold, right? So in this case, I want my attack to be really quick. I want my release to be fairly quick too, like around here. The release basically tells the compressor how long to hold on to the signal. So yeah, let me set a really drastic ratio. Let me go like 10:1, right? And let me bring down my threshold so I can start getting some compression. I already know I'm gonna get clipping anyway, so it's gonna compress regardless. Like if I hit play right now, it's gonna be compressing. So let me bring it down some more so I can affect more of the audio. And I don't think this is enough, honestly. So let me drag it down to even more drastic than. Hey! So if I bypass this, right? If I bypass the compressor, we'll hear how much louder it is without it. Hey! Versus. Hey! You can hear it, right? It got quieter. Hey! Okay. So we're gonna enable that. Hey! And we're gonna make up for the volume we lost, right? Hey! So on our meter it says hey! -8 decibels. So I kind of killed it basically 8 decibels. I can make it up back to 8 decibels. Hey! So, you know, you're starting to see our issue, right? This is my clip indicator. I'm clipping on my output gain. So now you're starting to see the issue of what happens when you set your mic pre too hot, right? You start to get clipping, and then you try to do all your techniques that you're supposed to do as far as like using compressors and adjusting for makeup gain once you compress a signal, and then you're still clipping, and then now you're clipping in two places. You're clipping on the clip itself, and now you're clipping in the plugin, and now it's just gonna create more clipping, and now you have just exponential clipping. That's not fun, right? So that's a whole lot of clipping. So you kind of don't want that to happen. But for this purpose, let's ignore that for now, and I'll teach you ways to kind of get around that and kind of alleviate some of the damage. So we made up some of the gain. Hey! All right. So, I mean, if I really want to get really fancy and compress really hard, I can copy this compressor, or I can use a different style compressor that just like chokes everything, right? So for this instance, I'm going to use a different compressor. There's some compressors that won't have like these settings as shown here. They're going to be a little bit more like abstract in their wording as far as what they do, or they're gonna just be a little bit more like dumbed down. You're gonna be like, huh, what does that even mean, right? So for instance, right, this Devil Lock plugin by Sound Toys, there's 2 knobs. You know, there's only 2 knobs on this plugin, and it's a crush and a crunch knob. So crunch, I'm not gonna need, that's more of like textural, right? Crush is just compression, and it's a very simple plugin that if I just turn the knob all the way up, it's gonna crush my signal, right? There's no makeup gain, there's no output makeup gain, there is no ratio I have control over. It's got a set ratio, it's got a set attack and release. All I'm really doing is bringing down the threshold, realistically, right? I think it might have an automatic makeup gain thing, but in reality, all I can affect is the crush knob, right? So let's just listen to it now, right? Hey. So now I can kind of hear, like, I can clearly hear it crush the first hey, right? And to the point where I can even hear my breath after that. And that's a good thing if our goal is to crush the signal enough so we can hear both of them, right? Hey! So now I can turn up my actual fader since I don't have a makeup gain knob, right? So I can find a nice pocket for this vocal track to sit in. Hey! So. Hey! 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 So that's kind of nice, right? I mean, if this is clearly not a real vocal track, I mean, if I really wanted to be extra, I could really throw some effects on here and make it sound like an ad lib, you know? Right, so let's just do that for the fuck of it. Let's just make it seem like it's an ad lib track, right? Let's make it a little bit more realistic. I'm throwing on a filter right now, and yeah, let's fuck around with it, right? I can get into this later, but it's a lot of shit going on. Yeah. So let's make it all extra, right? I'm gonna just do it extra for like example purposes. Hey! Hey. So now I have a crushed nice crushed ad-lib track with like ridiculous amounts of compression to the point where I can hear all the headphone bleed, right? So. Hey! So, I mean, this is a very drastic instance of compression, but let's fuck this quarter note delay shit. Let's do an eighth. Hey! Hey. All right, so that's cool, right? That's a cool little ad-lib track, I guess. Good thing to do sometimes is to clean up some of the, you know, excess headphone noise, you know? The headphone bleed, you don't really need that stuff. If you want to zoom in, you can kind of get a little bit more fancy, but Hey! Hey. Now, right? So that was a lot of work for 2 compressors to do, and then it got like kind of messy and all that, and so I told you guys I would get to the part where I could teach you how to I guess minimize the damage when you get some clipping in your recording. So now I'm clipping on the clip itself, and now I'm clipping on the plugin. Hey. I'm only compressing the first hey, I'm not compressing this one. So one way to minimize this, right, in Ableton and most DAWs you can do this, is that you can reduce the gain of the clip itself, right? So I can do this, right? So now I'm still clipping, you know, I clipped in the recording. There's no way I can get around that. You know, that's the reality. There's some sound restoration plugins that we can get into if we really want to, but in reality, we just should have recorded better. Or I should have, as an artist, I should have backed away from the mic when I did the first one, right? But since we can't do that, we have this instance. So now it's more evened out, and my compressor doesn't have to work as hard, and I can actually take off probably, you know, this I can disable this compressor and hey! 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 I'll bring my threshold down because now the audio is actually quieter. Hey! 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 Maybe I don't need such a drastic ratio. Maybe I can go like somewhere around like 8. Hey! But I can also turn this up, right? And you know, sometimes you want to preserve some of the dynamic range, right? Between the highs and the lows, because a lot of engineers' argument for preserving dynamics is that they want to preserve some of the like emotion in the song and in the signal, right? So when singers get real quiet and then they belt out real loud, you kind of want to feel that belt and you kind of want to feel that like come down, right? Understandable, right? Some people like to just go for flat out, just everything squashed across the board. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you're aiming for, go ahead. But you know, just keep that in mind as far as like what your approach is and what you're trying to go for creatively, or what your client wants, you know, creatively, and like given their headspace, you know. It's important to keep those things in mind when you are mixing records for yourself or for other clients. You know, there's really no right or wrong as far as like everything should be compressed to a full brick wall. I mean, these are just tools, and you take what you know about these tools and you apply it to whatever situation you have tastefully, you know? If you or whoever you're working with wants more crushed, aggressive direction creatively, then give them the compression. If they don't, if they want something a little bit more dynamic and more like almost like old school, lay off the compression maybe, you know? So just go with your gut, just go with your intuition, and you know, it'll lead you the right way. I'm gonna slap this Devil Lock plugin back on. I'm gonna unbypass this Devil Lock plugin so you can hear what it's doing. Hey! Hey. So it kind of packaged it nicely, honestly, in my opinion. It packaged the audio nicely, the combination between the ARC compressor and the Devil Lock, you know? Some of you might be asking, like, why are you using two compressors? Different compressors have different textures to them, different sounds, and although I might be able to try to accomplish, you know, the same sound with the ARC compressor, I mean, if you were listening to it earlier, it wasn't happening, you know? I needed a little bit more of a push, a little bit more of an aggressive compressor to kind of like make the audio more leveled out, so that way I can put it in a nice pocket in the audio, right? Over the beat, right, in the song. So, hey! Hey. Cool, right? So, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take the old version, right, of this recording before I even like reduce the gain, just to give you guys a visual of what these compressors are doing. I'm gonna mute this for now, and then I'm going to print this audio with these plugins on, so you guys can see like visually what is happening, right? Hey! Hey. Right? Okay. So if you can tell, I mean, Ableton prints things in stereo, so that's why you're gonna see two of these, right? But if I just make this bigger, right? This is the audio before it got compressed, and this is the audio before it got compressed. If you can look at it, I mean, if you look at it, you can tell that the audio here is leveled out, you know, visually. Audio over here is like dynamic as hell. You got one here, you got one right here. So that's kind of the goal I was trying to accomplish, was to make it leveled out so that way I can play it over the beat and nothing will get lost, right? So when you do like long ass vocal takes, right? Let me just fuck around for a little bit, right? All right. So, right, if I take this and it's not compressed, if you listen to it, it's not really like, you kind of catch some of the audio and some of it kind of dips out. It gets kind of like, it's kind of like hard to like figure out where it is, right? But if I enable these compressors that I threw on my ad-lib track ones, you know, you're gonna start to hear it levels out, right? So let me play it back. Cool, right? It fits over the beat now. Like I can play it. I can even move this whole thing, you know, over the drop, and it's probably still gonna be fine. I might just have to pull up the fader a little bit. Right, you get it? Okay. So that's like probably the most common use for a compressor, especially on vocals, is to just kind of take this signal that's dynamic as hell, especially with vocals. They're very dynamic. They're one of the most dynamic signals that you can possibly have. You want to kind of control it and like limit the range it lives within. That way you can fit it in different pockets, you know, in your signal. And that's kind of what you do in a mix, you know, when you're using compression. You take signals, compress them, and find pockets for them to sit. All right, well, I think that concludes our video. Stay tuned for the next one. Let me know what you think. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe, hit the notification bell button. We're gonna have more and more content while this whole fucking virus shit is going on. Let me know what you wanna see. Let me know what you think. Until next time.